My beloved child. There is a moment in every lifetime that arrives so quietly most people mistake it for an ordinary day. But this is not one of those days. Something unseen has been moving toward you long before you ever noticed the first sign. While you were wondering why certain doors refused to open, why certain people drifted away without explanation, and why your heart kept whispering that something greater was waiting just beyond your reach, an invisible story was already unfolding. And now you stand at the edge of a decision so deeply personal that even your own soul recognizes its weight before your mind can understand it. The question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you will recognize the invitation before doubt convinces you to walk away. Picture a traveler standing in the soft blue light before sunrise. The world is silent except for the distant song of birds greeting a morning that has not fully arrived. In that fragile silence, the traveler discovers an old envelope resting on a weathered wooden bench. No name is written across the front, yet somehow it feels strangely familiar. When trembling fingers lift the seal, nothing inside resembles money or treasure. Instead, there is a promise that everything painful endured was never wasted. Every lonely evening, every unanswered prayer, every goodbye that left invisible scars had been quietly shaping a future impossible to imagine from where the traveler once stood. Still, promises are easy to admire from a distance. Believing them requires courage. Far away, another heart carries the same invisible ache. The one destined to cross paths with yours has not escaped hardship either. They have stood in empty rooms wondering if they waited too long. They have smiled while hiding questions no one else could answer. More than once they almost accepted a life that felt comfortable simply because hope seemed too risky. Yet every time they tried to settle, something gentle but undeniable redirected their steps. They could never explain why certain conversations ended unexpectedly or why certain plans collapsed just before becoming permanent. What felt like disappointment slowly became protection, though neither of you could understand that while living through it. Then something unusual begins to happen. Small details refuse to remain ordinary. A familiar melody appears when your thoughts drift toward the future. A forgotten photograph resurfaces. A stranger speaks words that somehow answer a question you never voiced aloud. The air itself seems filled with quiet reminders that your story has not reached its final chapter. These moments are easy to dismiss individually, yet together they form a pattern impossible to ignore. Deep inside, you sense that your life is gently leaning toward someone whose name has not yet become part of your everyday conversation. But every meaningful journey reaches a crossroads. The traveler holding the mysterious envelope notices two paths stretching into the distance. One feels predictable, safe, and comfortably familiar. The other disappears into morning mist where nothing can be guaranteed except growth. Fear immediately begins its quiet negotiation. Wait a little longer, it whispers. You don't have enough proof. Stay where everything feels certain. Yet certainty has never created extraordinary stories. The heart often recognizes tomorrow long before the eyes can see it. As the traveler hesitates, the envelope grows unexpectedly warm. New words slowly appear across the page as though written by invisible hands. The greatest blessing is rarely lost through weakness. It is most often delayed by hesitation. Those words echo through every memory the traveler carries. Suddenly the missed opportunities of the past no longer seem like random accidents. Each one had started with the same small pause, the same second of uncertainty, the same quiet decision to wait until everything felt perfectly clear. And that realization changes everything. Because somewhere beyond the rising light, another person has reached their own crossroads at exactly the same moment. They too are standing between fear and faith, wondering whether to take one final step toward the life waiting beyond familiar limits. Neither realizes how closely their choices are connected. Then, just before the traveler folds the letter and begins walking, one final sentence slowly appears beneath the other's a sentence that was never there before. It reads, "The promise was never the reward, the promise was the meeting." And in that breathtaking instant, the traveler hears footsteps approaching from somewhere beyond the morning mist. The footsteps slowed just beyond the veil of silver mist, not with uncertainty, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a long time searching for the exact place they were meant to stand. The traveler held their breath. Every instinct urged them to look ahead, yet something even stronger whispered that the next few moments would forever separate the person they had been from the person they were becoming. Then a gentle breeze carried a familiar fragrance, one impossible to explain. It wasn't attached to a place or a memory alone. It felt like recognition itself, as though two stories written on different pages were finally being folded into the same chapter. The figure remained hidden, but another discovery demanded attention. The envelope, once filled with only a single promise, now contained a second page. It hadn't been there before. The paper looked untouched by time, yet the ink shimmered as if the words were being written in that very moment. It spoke not about rewards waiting at the end of the road, but about the unseen preparation that had been taking place all along. Every delay had quietly strengthened patience. Every unanswered question had deepened wisdom. Every disappointment had refined the ability to recognize genuine love instead of chasing temporary comfort. Suddenly, the waiting no longer felt empty. It felt intentional. At that same moment, the unseen traveler on the opposite path paused for reasons they couldn't explain. They had almost turned back earlier that morning. Doubt had convinced them they were arriving too late, that the opportunity meant for them had already slipped away. Yet just as they reached the point of surrender, an elderly stranger smiled warmly and offered only a single sentence before continuing on their own journey. Some meetings happen because people search. The greatest ones happen because neither heart gives up. The words settled deep inside them like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Without fully understanding why, they kept walking. Neither traveler knew how close they had come to missing this day. Far behind them, the roads they once trusted began to disappear into the landscape. Familiar voices that had always urged caution faded into silence. The places where fear had once held authority suddenly seemed distant, almost unreal. What once looked like loss now revealed itself as gentle redirection. It became impossible to ignore that every painful ending had quietly created enough space for something infinitely more meaningful to enter. Looking back no longer carried regret. It carried gratitude for doors that had remained closed. Then the emotional current shifted again. The traveler unfolded the final corner of the second page and discovered something unexpected, not a prediction, not a command, but a question. If everything you hoped for stood only one courageous decision away, would you recognize the moment, or would you wait for certainty until the opportunity quietly passed? No answer appeared beneath it. The silence itself demanded one. The traveler's heart raced. They realized that the true test had never been about proving worthiness or earning a blessing. It had always been about learning to move with quiet trust before every detail became visible. The promise wasn't asking for perfection. It was inviting willingness. That realization lifted a burden they had carried for years without realizing its weight. Then, for the first time, the figure beyond the mist stepped into the morning light. Their face remained impossible to distinguish, not because of distance, but because the rising sun wrapped everything in brilliant gold. Yet one unmistakable detail broke through the brightness. They were carrying an envelope identical to the one already resting in the traveler's hands. Both stopped. Both looked down. Both slowly opened the final sealed fold at exactly the same time. Inside each envelope was half of a single handwritten message. Neither half could be understood alone. And as they instinctively began walking toward one another to bring the two pieces together, the wind suddenly swept between them, carrying away one page before either of them could reach it. The loose page danced through the morning air like a living thing, rising instead of falling, gliding beyond the reach of desperate hands. For one instinctive moment, both travelers started after it. Then they stopped at exactly the same time. Chasing the page meant turning away from each other. Letting it go meant trusting that whatever had begun here was larger than a single piece of paper. Without speaking, they made the same choice. They remained where they were, watching the wind carry the missing words beyond the distant trees until they disappeared completely. In that quiet sacrifice, something invisible shifted. The fear of losing the message gave way to the realization that perhaps the message had already accomplished its purpose. As the distance between them slowly disappeared, the silence no longer felt uncertain. It became strangely comforting, like the peaceful hush that settles over the earth moments before the first stars appear. Each step awakened forgotten memories, not memories of faces or places, but of emotions. The traveler remembered believing as a child that every meaningful encounter happened for a reason. The other remembered abandoning that belief after too many disappointments. Now, standing only a few steps apart, they both sensed that hope had patiently survived beneath every layer of doubt, waiting for this single moment to breathe again. Neither reached out first. Instead, they looked at the two unfinished pages resting in their hands. One contained the beginning of a sentence. The other held its ending. Separately, neither seemed complete. But as they instinctively placed the pages beside one another, the words aligned with remarkable precision. Love prepared in truth cannot be received by a heart still imprisoned by yesterday. The sentence lingered in the stillness, not as a warning, but as an invitation. It explained something neither traveler had understood before. The greatest obstacle had never been distance. It had never been timing. It had been the invisible weight of old disappointments that quietly convinced each heart to expect another ending instead of a new beginning. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the traveler who had carried the first envelope finally broke the silence with a question so honest it seemed to soften the morning itself. What if we're still afraid? The answer did not come from the other traveler. It came from the sound of nearby water. Only then did they notice a narrow stream flowing beside the path, reflecting the golden sky with perfect clarity. Floating gently across its surface were tiny paper boats, each carrying a single handwritten word. One read, "Patience." Another, "Mercy." Another, "Courage." None of them struggled against the current. They simply trusted it. Watching them drift effortlessly downstream, both travelers understood something impossible to explain with logic alone. Life had been trying to teach them through every season that peace was never found by controlling every outcome. It was found by choosing the next faithful step. A smile finally appeared, not the smile of someone who had all the answers, but of someone no longer afraid of unanswered questions. The path ahead brightened. The air felt lighter. For the first time, the future no longer resembled a puzzle demanding to be solved. It looked like a story waiting to be lived. Yet just as they prepared to continue together, a soft glow emerged from beneath the second envelope. Hidden inside its lining, unnoticed until now, rested a tiny brass key unlike anything either traveler had ever seen. Delicate symbols were engraved along its surface, worn smooth by time. Attached to it was a narrow ribbon bearing only 6 handwritten words. "It opens what fear could never unlock." Both travelers stared at the mysterious key. Before either could speak, the ground ahead trembled almost imperceptibly, and far beyond the bend in the path, an ancient doorway, one that had remained invisible only moments before, began to slowly reveal itself through the morning light. The doorway did not stand within walls. It rose alone beneath the branches of an ancient oak whose roots stretched deep into the hillside, as though it had been quietly waiting through countless seasons for this exact morning. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns, illuminating the weathered wood without revealing what lay beyond it. The closer the two travelers came, the more they realized that the door cast no shadow. Instead, it reflected fragments of their own lives, not as they had remembered them, but as they had truly unfolded. The first reflection showed a painful farewell that had once seemed unbearable. Looking at it now, they noticed details they had never seen before. A delayed conversation had prevented a greater heartbreak. A closed opportunity had quietly redirected them toward unexpected growth. The second reflection revealed moments of kindness they had almost forgotten, small choices made with no expectation of reward, gentle words spoken to strangers, silent acts of compassion that no one had applauded. None of those moments had vanished. They had become part of the foundation beneath their feet, strengthening them for a day they never knew was coming. As they reached the foot of the oak, the brass key grew warm again. It did not pull toward the lock. Instead, it rested peacefully in the traveler's hand, as if waiting for something more important than a simple action. The companion beside them noticed an inscription carved into the stone surrounding the doorway. Time had softened its edges, but the message remained clear enough to read. The entrance opens only after the burden is named. Neither traveler spoke immediately. They understood that this was not asking for a performance or a perfect confession. It required honesty, nothing more and nothing less. The silence between them became sacred, creating room for truths that had waited years to be spoken aloud. The first traveler inhaled slowly. "I carried the belief that every disappointment defined my future." The words echoed gently through the grove before fading into stillness. The second traveler lowered their eyes. I believed I had missed my chance to become the person I was meant to be. As those words settled into the air, something remarkable happened. The heavy atmosphere that had surrounded the doorway dissolved like morning fog beneath the rising sun. The oak leaves shimmered, and the lock released a soft, unmistakable click without either traveler inserting the key. They looked at one another with quiet amazement. The key had never been designed to force an entrance. It had been a reminder that truth unlocks what fear keeps sealed. The door slowly opened. Beyond it was no glittering palace or breathtaking treasure. Instead, a long garden path stretched into the distance, bordered by wildflowers of every color. Laughter floated gently through the breeze, joined by the peaceful sound of running water. It was not perfection they saw. It was possibility, a place where healing and hope had learned to grow side by side. Every step forward invited them to release the need to control tomorrow and simply receive the gift of today. Then, just as they prepared to cross the threshold together, both noticed something unexpected resting on a stone pedestal at the entrance. It was a sealed parchment tied with a crimson ribbon. Across its surface appeared words neither of them had seen before. Only one truth remains unread. The ribbon loosened on its own. Before either traveler could unfold the parchment, a familiar voice, one they had each heard only in quiet moments of reflection but never in the presence of another, softly spoke their names from somewhere deeper within the garden. And both realized that the greatest revelation was not waiting inside the letter. It was waiting for them beyond the next turn of the path. The familiar voice did not call them forward with urgency. It invited them with peace. They stepped onto the winding path together, discovering that every bend revealed not answers written on stone, but living reminders that the future is built one faithful choice at a time. The flowers along the trail turned gently toward the morning light, and each breeze carried the quiet assurance that the hardest seasons of their journey had not been meaningless interruptions. They had been careful preparations for hearts capable of receiving something lasting instead of something temporary. The unopened parchment remained in the traveler's hands, yet neither felt compelled to break its seal immediately. That alone marked how much they had changed. Once, they would have rushed ahead, desperate to know every detail before taking another step. Now they understood that some truths reveal themselves only after trust has already begun its work. The path itself had become part of the answer. Every shared step replaced old uncertainty with quiet confidence, proving that genuine hope grows stronger when it is lived rather than merely imagined. As they reached the crest of a gentle hill, the landscape opened before them. Below stretched a valley washed in golden light, where streams reflected the sky like ribbons of glass and countless paths crossed without confusion. From above, they could finally see what had been hidden throughout the journey. Every road that once appeared broken had gradually curved toward this single meeting place. The painful detours, the unexpected delays, the unanswered questions, and even the moments that felt like failure had all been woven together into one beautiful design. Nothing had been wasted. Even the chapters they wished they could erase had quietly guided them toward greater wisdom, compassion, and courage. The traveler slowly untied the crimson ribbon. Inside the parchment was neither a list of future events nor a promise of an effortless life. It contained only a brief handwritten message. Your greatest blessing was never waiting at the end of the journey. It was the person you became while learning to walk with hope. The word settled deeply within both hearts. They realized the true reward had never been a perfect destination. It was the transformation that allowed them to recognize love, extend grace, and welcome new beginnings without being ruled by yesterday's fears. What they had sought outside themselves had first been quietly nurtured within. The companion smiled with a calm that needed no explanation. "We spent so much time wondering whether the path would lead us to the right moment," they whispered. "We never imagined the path was also shaping us into the right people." Those words became the final piece of the story. Every mystery that once seemed impossible to understand now carried gentle meaning. The missing page, the matching envelopes, the unseen crossroads, the hidden key, and the solitary doorway had each revealed a different truth. Hope is strengthened through patience, trust grows through honesty, and love flourishes where fear no longer holds authority. As the sun climbed higher, the valley filled with warm light, and both travelers stepped forward not because every question had been answered, but because they had discovered something even greater than certainty. They had found the courage to keep moving with open hearts, believing that every faithful step could become part of a story more beautiful than either of them could have written alone. And so, my beloved child, if this fictional story has touched your heart, let it remind you that even seasons of waiting can shape strength, kindness, and hope in ways that are only understood later. May you walk into each new day with courage, may peace steady your heart when the road feels uncertain, and may you never lose sight of the quiet light that invites you forward one step at a time. If this story encouraged you, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment with the word hope if this journey spoke to your heart, and subscribe for more uplifting fictional inspirational stories filled with wonder, courage, and new beginnings. Until next time, may your path be guided by wisdom, your heart remain open, and your days be filled with unexpected moments of grace. The two travelers remained on the hill until the last traces of morning mist disappeared into the horizon. Neither felt the need to search for another hidden sign or another unopened letter. The silence between them had become full instead of empty. It carried understanding rather than uncertainty. They finally realized that the journey had never been about proving themselves worthy of a blessing. It had always been about learning to recognize the blessings that had quietly surrounded them, even in seasons they once called losses. As they began walking down into the valley, familiar places appeared transformed. The narrow bridge that once seemed fragile now stood strong beneath their feet. The winding path that had felt endless now revealed its purpose with every step. They passed people carrying burdens of their own, and without saying much, they offered kindness, encouragement, and compassion. What they had received was no longer meant to be kept for themselves. Hope had become something to share. In giving it away, they discovered it only grew stronger. The envelopes, the key, and the parchment slowly faded into light, leaving behind no physical trace. Their purpose had been fulfilled. The travelers smiled as they understood that true guidance is never meant to become a possession. It becomes part of the heart. The objects had simply pointed toward a greater truth. Lasting peace is found not in having every answer, but in trusting that every meaningful step shapes who you are becoming. One final surprise awaited them before the day was complete. Near the entrance to the valley stood a small tree that looked ordinary at first glance. Yet its branches held countless tiny ribbons, each carrying a single handwritten word left behind by those who had walked this path before. Words like faith, patience, forgiveness, joy, and courage danced gently in the breeze. The travelers looked at one another. Without hesitation, they tied a new ribbon to the tree. On it they wrote only one word: together. As the ribbon caught the wind, the entire tree shimmered with quiet beauty, reminding them that every life leaves something behind for someone else to discover. Their greatest legacy would never be wealth, recognition, or applause. It would be the hope they inspired, the love they shared, and the kindness they chose when the easier path would have been indifference. The sun reached its highest point, bathing the valley in warm golden light. The road ahead stretched farther than either could see, yet neither feared what waited beyond the next horizon. They had learned that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning, and every faithful step can become part of a story far more beautiful than the one imagined at the start. And so, my beloved child, let this fictional story remain with you as a gentle reminder that even when life feels uncertain, your moments of growth, compassion, and perseverance are never without meaning. May your heart remain steady when the path is unclear. May hope rise again after every disappointment. May peace accompany your decisions, wisdom guide your steps, and love find you in unexpected ways. May you always have the courage to move forward with grace, trusting that brighter chapters can begin when you least expect them. If this story brought encouragement to your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Leave a comment with the word "together" to let others know they are not walking their journey alone. Thank you for spending this time here, and until our next story, may your days be filled with light, your heart with peace,